Perhaps I was talking when I should have been listening.
Hello. Welcome to what is going to be the final episode of Making Sense Out of my Affect Theory and Data Science course, part of the PhD program for American Culture Studies at BGSU. I'm Phil Beskid, normally joined with my wife Rachel for what I've been told is a Jugal Bandy. Not quite sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's proved useful. Just schedules couldn't align to make this happen, and I've probably postponed this assignment long enough, so I'm getting it out there. Been doing some traveling this summer and kept me away from Wi-Fi, and I guess I've procrastinated long enough. So what we're going to be going over today is a little bit of the final readings that I went through for this class and working through some of the more difficult concepts and try to work my way through all that. But I'd also like to potentially work through some of the ideas that I have for this final project proposal that we're also supposed to be doing. So maybe that's actually where I'll begin. So the idea for this final assignment is to put together a theoretical framework for a research project that is going to take from the affective turn and relate that or use these data science and computational tools that we've been working with, like Gephi and Netlytic, Communalytic, which is the one that I've determined that I like the user interface and feel most comfortable with. So I kind of wanted to go through a few of my ideas for all of that. And, you know, I find myself struggling a little bit when I'm trying to think of research projects because a lot of my PhD cohort sort of has like a real firm direction already, and I'm still just sort of floundering and trying to figure out what I'm going to be doing. But at least in regards to this particular assignment, I figured that, well, I really got myself thinking about, while I've been doing some of my summer travels, actually what prevented this assignment from happening a little bit sooner is I was traveling to and stayed for quite a while at a lake house that my in-laws have in the Madison, Wisconsin Dells sort of area. And we were spending time up there, and I was thinking about how, well, I guess while I was there, I was presented with a new Facebook group that had been put together for people that have property around the lake or even just the people that spend time at the lake. And I was thinking how I can, well, let me back up. I guess I was thinking about what the affectual experience for specifically my wife and her family, having grown up and spent a lot more time in this area, what sort of experiences they have and what sort of emotional attachments they have to particular things and how nostalgia sort of fits into that, and maybe how, in the broader sense, how affect then influences everything about the experience of being in that area. And potentially how that has changed over the years as, you know, families have grown and there's potentially less time being spent there. But anyway, there's all these sort of combinations of things. And then I started to think about, well, is there a way that we could use some of the tools that we've been presented with and been experimenting with in this class to sort of quantify the affectual experience of what it means to be at Lake Jordan in Oxford, Wisconsin. And I guess what I came to was, well, the fact that there's this existence of a Facebook group, and then that there's lots of postings on it. Well, if I could use something like Communalytic or Netlytic or something to analyze the posts and the interactions between the actors, then I could potentially get a lot of interesting information. So how exactly would you do that? Obviously, you would have to use some of those computational tools, but what would it be that you're looking for, I think, winds up being the question, especially when trying to work through this idea of coming up with a theoretical framework and a methodology sort of area of like, how exactly are we going to go about doing this? So then I started thinking about, well, what are the effective turns that you might be interested in doing research in this sort of way? And some of the things that are coming to my mind in regards to that are, well, maybe there's, in looking through the Jordan Lake Facebook group, what I see is a lot of postings about like beautiful days around the lake, right? So whether it's a sunrise or a sunset, looking at one here that's a perfect rainbow, even a double rainbow that goes across the lake. 4th of July fireworks over the lake, things like that, or even pictures of the fish that are being caught, or families having a good time, and the experiences are being had. And that's all, those positive affective turns, right? So I imagine that we could start filtering through some of these posts and using some of the filters that are available in something like Communalytic, like the sentiment analysis, to determine, what is the number of posts that are being made to this site that, have some sort of positive sentiment, and then analyzing what it is that's positive about it, and then sort of trying to break that down even further. Like, well, is this a fleeting positive sentiment about like, a sunset, or is that connected to like a reminder of beautiful sunsets from the past 50 years that you've collectively experienced? So maybe it would be possible to, sort of differentiate between whether or not it's more of a immediate or responsive positive sentiment, or if it's like one that's been built up over many years and passed on from generation to generation, potentially. So lots of interesting things that are sort of floating through my mind on there. But then, of course, if you look through Facebook, there's going to be some negative sentiment also, right? And what does that really take the shape of? And usually it's posts in regard to people abusing the lake in some sort of way. Like, for example, at the lake, there's rules about when you can have wake time, right? So from 11:30, or I think it's from 11 a.m. until 5:30 p.m., you can drive the boats fast around the lake, and there's jet skiers, water skiing, tubing, and all that kind of, general lake type activity that can happen during those times. But of course, there are people that don't want to follow those rules necessarily. So then people that are upset by that or have a negative sentiment take to the Facebook page to post about that, and maybe even try to, sort of like whistleblow a little bit, or even if it's just venting about, people that are being disrespectful to the lake, whether, it could be anything from the wake time issue that I described, or people that are cutting down trees, or in some other way doing something that is viewed as disrespectful. So again, using these computational tools, could we quantify that with negative sentiment analysis or toxicity factors and all that? And well, I guess what I've learned is that, sure, you can do those things using the computational tools that I've already mentioned, but what value would it have, and what is the best way to use those tools in order to sort of generate some sort of important research from this? So I guess that's where the question is now. I think I've decided, well, there's a theoretical framework there. I have to develop the idea of like, why am I now doing this? What's the point? Which I suppose is still the challenging part, but I think I'm going to get there. So that's what I think I'm going to be heading for this final project proposal. But I do want to spend some time talking about sort of the final bits of the readings that I went through for this course. And the two books that I chose was the Affect Reader, which is sort of like that guide to affect theory and culture studies. And I also chose to take a look at data discrimination. And I had pretty much worked through the data discrimination book pretty much. So the Affect Reader was much larger book. So there was more to go with that. And the final section that was left that I covered for this assignment was called After Affect. So it was a little bit less, this is what affect theory is about, and these are the different ways it's used. It's more like, well, what's next? Or even there was one section, one essay that was really like essentially a transcript of some of the other authors from the essays discussing like, well, where does this go now, right? Because affect theory is still being developed. There's still more to learn or different directions to go. But along the way, there was plenty of new concepts and terms still presented to me that I was unfamiliar with. So I'm going to try to work through some of those now. The first one that really stood out to me that I wanted to look more in depth into was called the technologies of public intimacy. And, doing some outside research, got some definitions and some things that I put together about this. Technologies of public intimacy refers to the ways in which technology and digital platforms have shaped and transformed the nature of public and private relationships, particularly within the context of American culture. It refers to the intersection of technology, communication, and personal connections, and how these dynamics have influenced the way people interact, form relationships, and share personal information in the public sphere. So, I guess what I'm taking from that is that because of digital platforms and modern technology, such as social media, of course, and even just the methods in which we use these forms of communication, meaning mobile devices or computers of any kind, software, right, that it has sort of transformed or changed how we create and maintain our relationships, how we interact within those relationships. And I think it's safe to say also that those technologies of public intimacy are not going to go away, right? So this is the new way, or the newish way that people interact, and of course it's changed the dynamics in ways. But I think what's crucial about this is that there's no turning around and saying like I just don't see, like I'm drawn to the end of the movie Fight Club or something, where just like, all of society is sort of broken down. There's going to be no debt left, and there's all this information is being on. It's not like, like the 5G network is going to like disappear and go away, and we're going to revert back to an old form of communications and building relationships. No, we're only continuing down this trend, and the technologies of public intimacy are only going to, our reliance on them is probably going to only increase. And what those technologies are, I mean, I'm not sure exactly where things go, but our reliance on them and our usage of them is not going to decrease. It's only going to increase is my assumption there. Continuing on some of my research about that, the concept of technologies of public intimacy explores how digital technologies such as social media platforms, smartphones, and online communication tools have redefined notions of privacy, personal expression, and social connection. These technologies enable individuals to share intimate aspects of their lives with a wide audience, blurring the boundaries between public and private domains. Absolutely. I'm thinking back to what I started talking about with the Facebook group page for the Lake Jordan, Wisconsin. So having the ability to, let's say, back to the example that I was explaining about like people disrespecting the rules about driving fast on the lake outside of a particular set of hours. Certainly not outside the realm of possibility that somebody has witnessed a person breaking those rules, taken a picture or video, and then posted to that page saying, who is this? And like, where do they live around the lake? Let's report this. Let's do something about it. And I see a real, that's that blurred boundary between public and private domains, right? Because nobody owns the lake. You can't tell somebody not to take a picture in a public space, but we're getting into that zone where there's just some ethical issues about privacy being concerned on there. Additionally, Technologies of public intimacy also raise concerns about surveillance and the commodification of personal data. The widespread use of technologies, individuals often sacrifice aspects of their privacy and personal boundaries. Online interactions can be subject to surveillance by both governmental and corporate entities, leading to potential threats to personal security and autonomy. I mean, this is sort of in the same realm, but yeah, the acceptance of using the technology in this way, you're sort of, by signing the user terms and agreements, like you're subjecting yourself to the collection of data to be used by whatever platform it is and whatever entities sort of supply that. I know people have concerns about using TikTok because, well, it's operated by Chinese, and are they collecting data? And I don't even know how deep that conspiracy or those issues go, but at least scratching the surface, you can understand what those potential issues might be. Okay, moving on to the next concept that stuck out to me from the final section of reading. So, idiotically stable. Okay. It might be understood as the interaction or communication between different groups or individuals with varying levels of knowledge or understanding, idiots, while stable suggests a state of equilibrium, right? So we're talking about interactions, exchanges, or communication between people with varying levels of knowledge or understanding. That happens all the time. Imagine back when COVID was, at its height, and it was a big deal, and we're talking more about misinformation, people with varying levels of understanding of things, still trying to be authorities and explain to people, and you can, just that idea sort of reveals some inherent issues about, like, well, what if people that don't have the same level of knowledge are trying to explain things, like me right now, trying to explain some of these terms that I'm still relatively new with to other scholars and colleagues in my cohort that probably have a better level of understanding of these things. So working through it, I think, is a way to sort of work out the kinks a little bit, but at the same time, I might be the idiot in the room when it comes to explaining some of this stuff. So don't always just take my word for it, right? Do some research on your own. But I'd like to move on from that because I found that the most interesting concept that I further explored from these readings were the pillars of glamour. And glamour was talked about specifically in regards to American culture as well, a significant role in how people perceive themselves. And the first pillar of glamour in American culture studies was celebrity. And further research shows me that the cult of celebrity plays a significant role in American culture, with the admiration and fascination for individuals in the realm of entertainment, sports, politics, and other influential fields. Celebrities are often regarded as glamorous figures, representing aspiration, charisma, and a certain lifestyle that many people find alluring. And yeah, you can see that in culture, right? I mean, if you're just going through the checkout line at the supermarket or something, you're going to see all the tabloid magazines and the fascination with celebrities, right? And their glamorous, so to speak, lifestyle, even if the appearance of what celebrity or glamour looks like changes over the years. It evolves to, think about different eras of time where, like, you think of like the classic era of like movie stardom, and that's when tuxedos and fancy dresses. But now it certainly wouldn't be out of question to see a red carpet event with modern celebrities that are very much dressed down in comparison to that. So the actual glamour part of it, I think, is less connected to the physical appearance. Although I think it's still there, but it's less associated with that than it is the fascination with the being famous. The second pillar is fashion and style. It's a central component of glamour, representing trends, aesthetics, and personal expression associated with beauty and elegance. The fashion industry, with iconic fashion designers, shows, influential figures, and all that, contributes greatly to the perception of glamour. So, again, it's very much connected to American culture, but I would argue that other cultures kind of claim the importance of fashion and style as well. I'm thinking particularly of other European countries, but not every culture is so fascinated with glamour, and I think that's what's important to understand how potentially exclusive this is to thinking about American culture. Along with fashion and style comes with entertainment and media as another pillar of glamour. Entertainment, including movies, television, music, and other forms of media, plays a crucial role in shaping and perpetuating glamour. The glamour associated with Hollywood, the red carpet, award shows, and the allure of fame are deeply ingrained in American culture. And for those of you watching or part of class, if you grew up in the United States, how many people or how often did you think, even personally, I want to be famous? I want to be rich and famous. I want to be an actor. I want to be a musician, a rock star. There's sort of like this. Well, I think just everybody goes through. It's just like saying that frequently young boys want to become a fireman or an astronaut or something like that. It's like everybody goes through a little stage where like, yeah, I'm going to be world famous. I'm going to be an actor, and I'm going to be on magazines, and I'm going to be in the movies. And so the actual entertainment world is perpetuating that idea by only showing you what is so glamorous about being in entertainment, right? So the media is showing you the glamorous parts, and then of course, we get little tastes of maybe the dark side of the entertainment business when you think about like, well, what eventually happens frequently to a lot of child stars. They go through this period of highly glamorous lifestyle, and then it doesn't always turn out so well, right? But we certainly don't. The American media doesn't necessarily focus on that or place an emphasis on that. It's still, even without writing it off or ignoring those situations that don't turn out so well, we certainly don't focus on them. Okay, another pillar of glamour: luxury and materialism. The association of glamour with luxury, opulence, and material possessions is prevalent in American culture. The pursuit of wealth, designer brands, expensive cars, and extravagant lifestyles contributes to the perception of glamour. Yeah. I keep thinking, when I'm looking at luxury and materialism, so I keep thinking of old episodes of like MTV Cribs, where you see, musicians or famous people and you go through their homes and they want to, specifically when you get to the driveway or the garage, right? And they just got the spread of all their cars and their fancy vehicles and, things that they certainly don't need. But having those material possessions is directly associated with having a lot of style, being glamorous, it being in the entertainment industry, right? The other elements of glamour that are connected here: beauty and physical appearance, and social status and success. So all these different things sort of contribute to our understanding of what glamour is, and I think reinforce some of the ideas that are being presented to us and perpetuated by American media. All right. I wanted to get through one more of these things. And the final concept that I wanted to go over is quite different than the glamorous stuff we were just talking about, and that is biocapitalism. And in the context of culture studies, that refers to the form of capitalism that commodifies and exploits biological life processes and resources for economic gain, and encompasses the intersection of capitalist principles with the biological domain, including fields such as biotechnology, pharmaceuticals, genetics, and healthcare. Under biocapitalism, biological entities such as human bodies, genetic material, and natural resources are treated as valuable commodities that can be bought, sold, patented, and exploited for profit. This approach views life itself as a form of capital, subjecting it to market forces and profit-driven motives. Whoa. It's one thing talking about, what the dangers of media portraying glamour, and maybe the negative associations that might have, but thinking about what they mean here, human bodies and genetic material being treated as valuable commodities, that's a dark thing to think about, and not necessarily like all roses, right? I mean, I think of, back in high school, I had a friend that was like, convinced that, they were going to have other people's babies, basically, right? And using their body as a form of commodity, right? Saying like, well, I will do that. I will basically grow someone else's baby because I'm healthy and I could do that, or I have these desirable physical attributes, and someone's willing to pay for that. That's a crazy thing, but I never thought about the breadth or the scope of biocapitalism, and when you just read something like this, how nasty that could potentially be, and does biocapitalism, what are the ethical issues with that, and is that bad? Or because I'm looking at it as like a negative, like a dark thing is what I said, but is it necessarily, or does it just mean that that someone is being resourceful or something? The concept of biocapitalism is often examined within the context of power dynamics, social inequalities, and ethical considerations. Researchers analyze the influence of biotechnological advancements on concepts of identity, the medicalization of everyday life, and the privatization of healthcare. Think about the medicalization of everyday life. If any of you have like elderly family members, do they have that little that pill case with a letter for every day of the week that they fill up with pills and things? Like, is that's what we're talking about here? That's part of this this biocapitalism, where we're using people's bodies as a way to bring in profits, right? Think of the COVID vaccinations. How many COVID vaccinations have you had, and will you ever stop getting them? Or are you signed up for life based on a quarterly booster shot or something like that? I'm not trying to say whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, but it certainly falls under the realm of what I'm understanding about biocapitalism now. And that's just, that's a lot to think about, isn't it? All right. That's going to be it for the final episode of Making Sense of Affect Theory and Data Science. Thanks for listening to my ramblings throughout this semester. And I appreciate any thoughts or help you could provide for, my understanding of some of these concepts, but also, where I could go for culture studies research. Because, like I said before, I'm struggling a little bit myself to narrow the scope down, because it's so wide, open, and I need to sort of trim it down. Anyway, this has been Phil Beskid. Take it easy.